Day 181 of the war in Gaza. Intense IDF operations are underway in southern Gaza as the army confronts pockets of Hamas resistance. This as Israel still faces heavy fallout from this week's tragic accident in which 7 aid workers were killed in an IDF airstrike. More from ILTV's Steve Leibowitz.
There were heavy ongoing clashes in the Al-Qarara and Abbasids areas north of Khan Younis. The army eliminated terrorists with tank fire, sniper ambushes, and targeted strikes while destroying underground terrorist infrastructure in the area. The forces located and confiscated weapons, including guns, cartridges, and ammunition, and documents of intelligence value. The fighters located and destroyed a rocket launcher in the middle of a civilian olive grove. The Givati Brigade is operating around the Al-Amal neighborhood in Khan Younis. Fighters are scanning and cordoning off the area and raiding the terrorist infrastructure in the neighborhood. IDF Chief of Staff Halevi conducted a situational assessment with senior commanders and commando forces in Khan Younis, during which he stressed the importance of creating sufficient pressure to enable the return of the hostages.
ואנחנו לוחצים גם כדי לנסות להביא לתזוזה במשא ומתן, להביא להסכם שחרור חטופים. זו משימה עליונה מאוד חשובה, היא תגיע רק מלחץ.
Meanwhile, fallout continues over Israel's accidental airstrike killing 7 staffers of World Central Kitchen in Gaza. U.S. Defense Secretary Austin called Defense Minister Gallant, with the Pentagon saying Austin expressed outrage over the incident and called to immediately take concrete steps to protect aid workers and civilians in Gaza after repeated coordination failures with foreign aid groups. Austin urged Israel to conduct a swift and transparent investigation and said the tragedy reinforced concern over a potential Israeli operation in Rafah and the need to ensure the evacuation of Palestinian civilians and the flow of humanitarian aid. Israel has apologized and launched a thorough investigation of the incident. They also reached out directly to the founder of World Central Kitchen, Jose Andres.
They have been in contact with him directly and personally to, first of all, say that we regret this awful tragedy, and second of all, to say that we are looking into everything possible to make sure that this won't happen again. So yes. This is a very complex war situation. Every war is very difficult, it's very messy, it's very dangerous, and it has casualties that we would all rather not have on the Israeli side and on the Palestinian side. So having said that, Israel has been checking itself every day. We have been reviewing our actions in different manners, also in the field, but also regarding what we can do to distribute aid.
Hamas political chief Ismail Haniyeh rejected the latest proposal made by Qatari and Egyptian mediators for an exchange of hostages for Palestinian security prisoners and an extended pause in Gaza fighting. No signs of a breakthrough are in sight. More from ILTV's Devil Klein.
Hamas political chief Ismail Haniyeh rejected the latest mediated offer for a hostage deal. He said Hamas is at war with Israel and is sticking to its conditions for a permanent ceasefire in the Gaza Strip, including a complete Israeli military withdrawal.
وإننا هنا نؤكد وبوضوح أننا متمسكون بمطالبنا المتمثلة بالوقف الدائم لإطلاق النار والانسحاب الشامل من قطاع غزة والعودة الكاملة للنازحين إلى أماكن سكنهم وإدخال كل المساعدات اللازمة لأهلنا في غزة وإعمار القطاع ورفع الحصار وإبرام صفقة أسرى مشرفة، وذلك كله على طريق إنجاز حقوق شعبنا الفلسطيني في أرضه ووطنه ومقدساته.
In recent months, negotiators indicated that Hamas was privately willing to compromise on its demands for a permanent ceasefire in favor of a phased deal that would start with a 6-week truce. Israeli officials were in Egypt earlier this week in a renewed effort to secure a deal, but those close to the mediation efforts say there are no signs of a breakthrough. Meanwhile, protests by families of the hostages continue to intensify. A protest mounted in the Knesset as some protesters smeared paint on the partition between the visitors' gallery and the plenum. Protesters chanted now at lawmakers demanding the return of their loved ones, who had been held captive in Gaza for 181 days. The protesters were ushered out by security guards.
As Israel battles in Gaza and prepares for an imminent escalation in the north, here to speak with us about the future of the war and Hamas's strategy is Colonel Grisha Yakubovich. Grisha, thank you so much for joining us. Just to start, what is Hamas's game plan here? I mean, they've rejected multiple offers for, prisoner releases and for even temporary ceasefire. So what do they want?
Well, Emily, first of all, thank you for hosting me. Hamas, and I'm sorry to say that. I know. Maybe many people will feel bad with that, but I don't see Hamas reaching to a deal until the end of Ramadan and maybe after Eid al-Fitr, April 10th. For them, for them, it looks like they are trying to do whatever they can to win this war. So maybe operationally, when it comes to the IDF, we did a great job. But when it comes to the isolation of Israel, when it comes to public opinion, when it comes to delegitimacy, when it comes to the UN, they are winning. So, and they are doing and unfortunately, they are doing a great job. So let's not forget, there are two goals that the government of Israel decided. One is to release all the hostages, and two is to make sure that Hamas will not be able to function after this war, the day after. So Hamas have all the interest in the world to keep the hostages, to make sure that Israel will not be able to achieve those two goals.
Now, what is the situation on the ground in Gaza presently? Will we be seeing this long-awaited Rafah operation? And even if we do, is that enough to actually take out Hamas?
I don't think that Rafah is the biggest issue now. Yes, it was. It was. We should have done that long time ago. But as and I want to clarify that I don't think that we need to enter to Rafah. The thing here that we need to enter to the border between the Gaza Strip and Egypt. We are talking about 13.9 kilometers of a border, and I will define it as the corridor of this border, that Israel should have long time ago, at the beginning of the war actually, take control over that border, making sure that the oxygen that Hamas gets underground from the tunnels between Egypt and Gaza will be eliminated as fast as possible. And as long as we are not there, they have the underground tunnels and they get the oxygen, if I may say so. So they get the weapons, the food, the fuel, whatever they need to continue actually being there. So yes, maybe operationally the IDF, not maybe, operationally, militarily, the IDF is doing a wonderful, amazing job, killing thousands of terrorists, but it's not enough. And if they don't feel that they are, maybe I will explain it in a different way. They need to feel that somebody is holding the hand over the throat and they are about to strangle, so they will be, or they will allow themselves to reach to a deal. As long as they are not there, they have no interest to reach to a deal. This is why Rafah is crucial, but not the district. I'm talking about the corridor. And this is the difference. Now, the problem that we don't do that, and this is actually the dilemma to the government, legally, the moment you do that, you are effectively controlling the Gaza Strip. And if you are effectively controlling the Gaza Strip, you are obligated to provide the services to 2.1 million people.
Right. Now, is there any potential in the coming weeks or months of building some sort of coalition to rule Gaza? Perhaps even, I know there was an idea floated about a coalition of Arab states, which, of course, the Palestinian leadership rejected. The day after this war, what's it going to look like? What is Israel thinking it could look like?
Well, this is also one of the obstacles. This is why the government of Israel still did not release the plan for the day after. And I think that this is the biggest mistake that this government did. Because if 4 months ago, we would release a plan for the day after, I believe that we will be probably, or we could get a better backup from the Western world. But politically, the obstacle in Israel, that nobody wants the Palestinian Authority. Now, let's be honest. the Palestinian Authority in the West Bank is losing control. And they are also terrorists. Only the last year and a half, only from the beginning of the war, 54 Palestinian officers were killed by the IDF as terrorists. It means they killed Israelis. They tried to harm the IDF. They tried to execute terror attacks. So they were killed by the IDF. And it's the same Palestinian Authority that is supposed to get back to Gaza. So it's a built-in conflict. On one hand, I don't see any other solution than the Palestinian Authority. And on the other hand, how can we allow them to be there? And this is the biggest dilemma. So maybe we should think, maybe the government is trying to think about local powers in Gaza. But as long as Hamas exists in Gaza, there's no possibility that a local power will grow because Hamas will do whatever they can to eliminate them. So it's a very complicated situation that instead of creating a win-win-win situation, it's a lose-lose-lose situation for all parties.
Well, it was not uplifting news, but definitely insightful. We are out of time. I want to thank you, Grisha, for joining us and for your incredible insight on the Gaza Strip. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Experience the power of truth with ILTV News. If you're looking for quality content and captivating visuals, join our news community and become an integral part of our team as we embark on a mission to unveil the real Israel, dismantling the web of lies and misinformation that surround reporting on Israel. By subscribing to ILTV News, you will not only have access to the latest updates, but you will also amplify our message, creating a ripple effect that carries the truth far and wide. Subscribe today and help reshape the narrative. Available on the web, Android, and Apple.
The IDF has bolstered its air defense and called up reservists in anticipation of an Iranian retaliation for the airstrike in Damascus that killed a top Islamic Revolutionary Guard commander. More from ILTV's Steve Leibowitz.
IDF air defense reservists were mobilized amid persistent threats of retaliation coming from Iran. The strike on Monday on an Iranian consular building in the Syrian capital killed Mohammad Reza Zahedi, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps' most senior official in Syria, along with his deputy and 5 other Iranian officials. Speculation has grown suggesting that Iran could attack Israel from its own territory rather than through proxies. Both Iran and its proxy Hezbollah have vowed that Israel will not go unpunished for Monday's attack on a consular building next to Iran's embassy in Damascus.
این شکست قطعاً ادامه پیدا خواهد کرد. این شکست ادامه پیدا خواهد کرد. این تلاش‌های مذبوحانه هم مثل این کاری که در سوریه مرتکب شدن که البته سیدیشو خواهند خورد.
Defense Minister Gallant said the IDF is prepared for every scenario. After hinting that Israel was behind the bold assassination, he warned that Israel's enemies will pay a heavy price for their aggressions.
ראשית, אנחנו נמצאים במלחמה רב-זירתית. זה גם בהגנה וגם בהתקפה. אנחנו מקבלים לעניין הזה עדות בכל יום, כולל בימים האחרונים. אנחנו פועלים בכל מקום, בכל יום, כדי למנוע את ההתעצמות של האויבים שלנו, וכדי להעביר לכל מי שפועל כנגדנו בכל רחבי המזרח התיכון, שהמחיר על פעולה כנגד ישראל יהיה מחיר כבד.
Well, in a surprising statement from Fatak, the political party of Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas, they came out with a statement condemning the Islamic Republic of Iran's interference in Palestinian affairs. The statement condemned the Islamic regime's attempt to spread chaos in the region and said their agenda has nothing to do with the Palestinian cause. The statement reads that Fatak will not allow their, quote, sacred cause and the blood of our people to be exploited, end quote. This comes just days after Israel intercepted a large delivery of advanced weapons being smuggled into the West Bank to terror groups. Both Palestinian Islamic Jihad and Hamas are funded by the Islamic Republic, in addition to the Houthis and Hezbollah. Part of the Islamic Republic's strategy has been to use their proxy terror groups to carry out the genocidal agenda of the regime itself. U.S. First Lady Jill Biden has reportedly asked her husband and U.S. President Joe Biden to end the war in Gaza. Following the statement, the White House confirmed that the comment was not a demand for policy change. ILTV's Devil Klein has the report.
In an emotional statement following the death of 7 foreign aid workers in Gaza, First Lady Jill Biden reportedly pleaded to her husband, Joe Biden, to end the war in Gaza, as she said, quote, stop it now. The comment came on Tuesday after the White House iftar dinner in honor of Ramadan, an event that saw many Muslim leaders and Congress members, including Representatives Ilhan Omar and Rashida Tlaib. The White House was quick to confirm that the comments from the First Lady were expressive of the pain over the deaths of civilians and not a request from the Biden administration to withdraw support from Israel's war against Hamas. Finally, Washington clarified that there is no daylight between Joe and Jill on policy.
Political tensions continue to rise in Israel as the war in Gaza rages on after 6 months. Yesterday, MK Benny Gantz formally called for elections, and many of the public have been doing the same. Here to speak with us about the possibility of elections is Eliav Brewer, Jerusalem Post political correspondent. Thanks so much for joining us.
It's great to be here.
Now, what does Benny Gantz hope to gain by calling for elections right now?
I think first and foremost, he wants to gain some calm. There's been a lot of unrest on the streets in recent days, and he explained that he called for an election for there to be, he said he wants quiet in the ballot box instead of flames on the streets.
Now, what is the sentiment on the street? You mentioned that there's been a lot of unrest in recent days. What is happening? There are some Israelis protesting for elections. There are others saying we're in the middle of a war and now is not the time. What are Israelis thinking?
That's a great question. I know that many people who were fed up with this government before October 7th have come back kind of last week for the first time in large numbers. I think that as opposed to a lot of protests last year, there's now an added edge to it, which is the fact that we still have hostages in Gaza. And those two causes have kind of merged together. The hostage families are accusing Prime Minister Netanyahu of being the main barrier for a deal, and that kind of fits in with all the rest of the protesters who essentially have started calling loudly for the removal of Netanyahu for the first time since the war broke out.
Now, what would that mean for the hostages should Netanyahu be replaced? I mean, we have seen Hamas reject multiple offers made by the Israeli government. So is there any reason to believe that it would be different with a different, say, prime minister?
So I think that I'm obviously not privy to what's going on behind closed doors. I will say this, though, that Netanyahu, as long as his government is in power, needs to take into account the positions of the ministers far to his right, Itamar Ben-Gvir and Bezalel Smotrich, who are willing to pay far less than him and can threaten with bringing down the government if he, in their opinion, gives up too much on a deal. Ironically, if we go to an election, then in the interim period of 3 months, which is required by law till the election happens, Netanyahu will be freer to move forwards with the deal because he won't have to take into account a threat by his far-right ministers of bringing down the government because the government's already fallen.
It's a very interesting political complication there for that 3-month period should elections be formally called. As a final question, I'm wondering what you think the impact of a change of government would be in the middle of a war. Would this have practical implications on the ground for the war, both in Gaza and perhaps on the northern front as well?
So again, I think it's really hard to tell. I think that it can go both ways. It can create more tension and kind of take away focus on the war effort, which I think a lot of people are afraid of. Elections in Israel tend to be very stormy, very sharp, very, I guess, we're used to that all over the world now, but elections aren't a peaceful time. On the other hand, I think that there's a lot of public outrage and a lot of doubt, a lot of distrust in public institutions, and the knowledge that we're going to an election, especially if all of the political system agrees to go to an election, could lead to a little bit to lowering the flames on the streets, and actually to give the army and the political establishment a little bit of a clearer head to focus on the war effort. So it essentially could go both ways. It's too early to tell.
Well, we will be watching closely to see what happens with the never-ending Israeli electoral system. Thank you for joining us, Eliav.
Thank you so much.
Ari Fold, an American-Israeli and frequent commentator here at ILTV, was slain in a Palestinian terror attack in 2018. Now, a U.S. court is ordering the Islamic Republic of Iran and Syria to pay damages for their role in the attack. Judge Royce Lamberth in a U.S. District Court in Washington, D.C., ruled that Iran and Syria owe Fold's family a total of $191 million for their material support of Hamas. In 2018, Fold was stabbed multiple times by a Hamas terrorist at a Gush Etzion junction in the West Bank. Even after being stabbed multiple times, Fold was able to chase after the attacker and shoot him. The court evaluated evidence that proved Hamas was responsible for the attack and also considered evidence showing Iran and Syria's intent to pursue an English-speaking Israeli-American soldier. The Islamic Republic of Iran has long been in pursuit of targeted assassinations against many Israelis. It's always exciting when new details about Jewish presence in the land of Israel in biblical times are unveiled. Well, archaeologists in northern Israel have discovered an immense underground hideout dug by Jewish villagers nearly 2,000 years ago at a time of revolt against the Roman Empire. More from ILTV's William Sharon.
Archaeologists say that the labyrinth, comprised of narrow tunnels and bigger rooms, was evidence that the Jewish communities, as far as the north as the hills of the Galilee, where Jesus is believed to have preached, prepared for the Roman legions quashing rebellions closer to Jerusalem. They carved a hideout that wins at least 100 meters under their village.
As we continued to excavate, we were amazed to see how big this complex is. It's not just this room, there's another room behind us and another room behind the next. And we have a tunnel from room to room, and one tunnel goes to the right and the other goes to the left.
Cramped burrows, too tight for an armed legionnaire, run between larger cavities where there is room to stand. Gather and store precious goods, the cave system was designed to save entire families.
Now, in a complex, underground complex, from the time of the second Jewish revolt against the Romans, in the first half of the 2nd century AD, we are in a shelter that was dug beneath the Jewish village that is here 5 meters above us. And it was dug for families to hide while the Romans are here, and because they feared for their life, for the children. It's very exciting for me as an archaeologist, and I think for all the people to come here and have the opportunity to come and hold the ancient history in their hands.
There were 2 ill-fated revolts against the Romans in the Holy Land, during the period culminating with the destruction of the Second Temple in Jerusalem in the year 70. Decades later, famed leader Bar Kokhba led an uprising that was eventually defeated. Similar hideouts from that time have been found in the foothills of Jerusalem, along with evidence of the destroyed villages. But this was the first Bar Kokhba-era hideout of such scope to be unearthed. Much further north, in a spot called Hakuk, there were no signs of destruction, suggesting that the fighting did not reach that area. There are still more burrows to be cleared from the dirt and more artifacts that offer a glimpse into the life of the Holy Land 2,000 years ago.
Let's take a look at the weather forecast. Mostly clear skies are expected tonight around the country, alongside lows of 13 degrees Celsius or 56 degrees Fahrenheit. Then tomorrow, mostly sunny skies and rising temperatures, reaching highs of 27 degrees Celsius or 81 degrees Fahrenheit. Temperatures should drop slightly over the weekend. That's all for today's news. For more updates from Israel on all your devices, check out our ILTV channels, subscribe to our ILTV newsletter, and don't forget to check out our new and improved website, iltv.tv, with all the latest news from the heart of the State of Israel. I'm Emily Schrader. Be well, and thank you so much for watching.